I'll tell you a story.
Tell me Robin Williams' story.
What, huh? Oh,
Robin
yeah.
Williams. Tell me the Robin Williams story.
Robin Williams story. So we're Comedy Factory Outlet. We're a little side street in Philadelphia. We're not in Los Angeles. We're not in New York. We're a little dinky club in the South. Okay. Car pulls up. Guy gets out. Says, can we get 4 tickets? I said, sorry, we're sold out. Goes back to the car. Comes back. Said, my friend in the car says, if you get us 4 seats, he'll do a free show for you. Who's your friend? He said, Robin Williams. We went over, we looked in the car. It was Robin Williams. We found 4 seats, okay? Now, he knew, like Soupy Sales, if they saw him, the show was over. So we hid him in a little room downstairs. And we told all the other acts, just do 10 minutes apiece. So they all did 10 minutes. And the MC, who was Dennis Johnson, said, sometimes a big star comes in, wants to do a free show. Here he is, Robin Williams. And everybody went, yeah, right. And Robin Williams walked on stage. And they went nuts. And he did an hour. And he did so much, he had so much fun. He did another hour, second show. And the next day, every friend I had was mad at me because they said, you had Robin Williams and you didn't tell me. We didn't know. We didn't know.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and I'm back. I was off last week. Me and the wife went to Cleveland, which actually was a great city. We went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame, the Art Museum. Wonderful time. And if you get out there because it's a fun city. And also don't forget to go to coopscomedycorner.com. They have all things Steve Cooper, all kinds of swag for not only this show, but also for Cooper Talk and the Coop Tank. So you go in there and get some great merchandise. And today we have a great guest. The show's Coop's Comedy Corner. And I guess, this guy is a Philadelphia comic legend, and he's a historian of comedy. I know it's funny when Kate Flannery was on a few weeks ago. When I interviewed Kate many years ago in LA, her first show, I brought up my guest, and her first show was with him. And my guest is the one and only Tommy Moore. How you doing, Tommy?
Hello, I'm doing good now that I see you. I haven't seen you in 35 years. Do you really? You know how old that makes me feel? I mean, I am old. I admit I'm old. All right. My last birthday cake, there were 12 candles on my piece. Okay. I pee Morse code. All right. The last time I said, look at those tits, I was staring into a mirror. I'm old. But the only thing that makes me feel young is I work for people older than me. I do all these senior citizen shows, and these people are old. I did a show last week. These people were so old. You don't put a glass of water down, you come back, there's teeth in it. All right? John Philip Sousa played at their prom. But they're active. They're active seniors. We had one couple who was 80, 85. They just got married. They spent their honeymoon getting out of the car. All right? The groom drank champagne from the bride's slipper, almost choked to death on her corn plasters. They wrote their own marriage vows. They didn't say I do. They said we'll try. The bridal registry was at CVS. All right. 9 months later, they had a kid. The kid was born with a mustache. Next show, 10 o'clock, and tip your waitress. Okay.
Exactly. I've never really sat down and talked to you. I've known you for a long time from the Comedy Factory days I met you. But when did you start comedy and what got you into it? Because I know when you started, there wasn't even a scene in Philly, I believe. I don't even know if you're from Philly.
No.
How did you get into comedy?
All right. Well, first, the reason I became a comic is because of Ed Sullivan's show. I saw the comedians on Ed Sullivan, and I heard they made $5,000 for 5 minutes, and there was no heavy lifting. I said, this is the job for me. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do. My father was an assistant manager in vaudeville theaters. And he would tell me stories of comedians every night. And that got me hooked. I got to tell you a story about my father, okay? Years later, I decided to produce my own show. A lot of people ask, were your parents supportive? I produced my own show with Katie Flannery in it. She was about 12, okay? And there were like 15 acts, and I did it like the Ed Sullivan Show, and I rented the place, and I paid the acts, and I lost $350. And my father came the next day and said, how much did you lose? I said, $350. He reached in his pocket. He said, here's $350. Don't give up. That was my father, all right? I'll tell you a story about my mother because I had to give him equal time, okay? I was about 9 years old. I wanted to be a comedian. That was it. We were at a bookstore, and there was a book called The Essential Lenny Bruce. Now, I knew Lenny Bruce was the new hot comic. I wanted that book. I went to the cashier. She wouldn't sell it to me. She said, you're too young for this book. I brought it to my mother. She looked at it. Now, you got to understand, my mother was never more than 6 feet away from a prayer book or rosary beads in her life. She opened the book, the first page. There were probably 6 of the 7 words you can't say on TV. She said, you want this book? I said, yeah. She took me over to the counter, said to the lady, you see this? This is my son. You sell him this book. That was my mother, okay? So they were very supportive. How did I get into it? My father talked a club owner into giving me my first show. It was New Year's Eve, 1972. And my mother literally, I didn't have a tuxedo. You had to have a tuxedo. She sewed a ribbon stripe down my pants, and she put black buttons on my shirt. And I bought a black velour jacket from 2 Guys. Remember 2 Guys? They only had 2 jackets. One
Two guys.
I bought that, and I went in early, and the club owner says, okay, your father said you're good. Go on now. I said, it's 9 o'clock. There's only 2 people here. He said, they're people, ain't they? He said, it's now or never. I went on. I did my 10 minutes to 2 people, and I got off totally dejected. The bartender crooked his finger, said, come here, kid. He said, you're good. I listened to you. You keep it up. 20 years later, I was like a little bit of a big shot in Philadelphia. I had my own TV show, a segment on the Out in the Town show. I had my new newspaper column. I was like a little mini celebrity. And I got booked to do a very exclusive dinner club. And I looked at the bartender and I tried to take 20 years off his face. And I said, were you the bartender 20 years ago at Scaparato's? He said, yeah. I said, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. So I always thank that bartender.
Wow.
Don't get in there. Because see, when I started, there were no comedy clubs. We worked for these guys. You know what I mean? If you don't know what this means, the boys. They were, think Sopranos or The Godfather, okay? I would walk on stage. I knew at any one time, half the audience knew where Hoffa was buried, and one guy still had the shovel, okay? These were places with flocked wallpaper and a statue of Venus de Milo with the arms broken, and the owner broke the arms himself just to keep in practice, okay? It didn't worry me because I'm Italian. I live in that kind of neighborhood. I know those guys. Matter of fact, on my side of the street alone was 100 years off for good behavior. All right. We had a neighbor with a parrot, and the parrot wouldn't talk unless his lawyer was present. Right. So I knew all these guys, and I worked all those places, and they were way before comedy clubs. And you did what you had to do. An agent booked me. First of all, in those days, you had an agent. You would go, and a guy chomping on a cigar would pick up a phone and say, you'll be there. That's $100. Agent booked me for a show in South Philadelphia. And I went, and all over the neighborhood, there were signs, Las Vegas show. Okay. I walked in. I said, what time is the show? He said, don't worry about it. What? He said, we don't care about a show. We put up the signs, Las Vegas show, so the neighbors know it's Las Vegas night. They had a totally illegal casino. Everything, their card, blackjack, roulette wheel, craps, everything. He said, now, the only reason we have a show is if we hear that the police are going to raid the place. We fold up the tables, we put on the show. All right, the show was me, a band, and a singer. Okay? About 1 o'clock in the morning, he comes over and says, you guys have been goofing off all night. Let's do a show. Matter of fact, let's do 2 shows. We'll do 1 show right now. We'll do another show at 3 o'clock. All right. Okay. You're the boss. All right. So the band plays. Nobody dances. They're playing cards. They're roulette. They're throwing crap. They don't care about dancing. The singer sings. Nobody listens. They don't applaud. They don't care. They're playing craps. But I'm a young comic. I'm 20 years old. I'm going to do good. I went out there and I pounded away. And they start to laugh. And they're laughing more. And I feel good. And I get off. I'm victorious. And the owner comes up to me and he points a finger in my face. And he says, hey, funny boy. You made them laugh, didn't you? I said, yeah. He said, you know what they were doing when they were laughing? I said, no. He said, they weren't losing money. The next show, you don't be so funny, okay? Or I'll pull that microphone out of the wall and wrap the cord around your neck. Welcome to show business. All right?
It's funny. It's funny you said South Philly. I want to ask you, were you going to Atlantic City? I mean, where were you playing besides South Philly? Because, I know you were in the forefront of the comedy scene when at the Jailhouse and all that. But before that, you played South Philly, you're 20 years old. You had to want to get work. And it must have been frustrating that there wasn't just like later.
We would go anywhere and do anything. I did only one talent contest. This was a second in Chestnut, believe it or not. Okay. And it was a Thursday night, and the winner would get $50 paid on a Friday. Ooh, but it was one of those clubs. All right. It was me and 4 singers. 3 singers sang Feelings. 1 sang You Light Up My Life. And then I went on and I won. The girl who came in second was the girl who sang You Light Up My Life. And I think they just let her come in second because she didn't sing Feelings. Okay. Now, I come the next night. I'm excited. I'm going to make $50. I'm there 3 hours early. All right. I'm always everywhere 3 hours early. I go up to the building. There's police tape across the window. There's a padlock on the door. And I look in the window. There's bullet holes in the window. Now, I don't know if I felt worse that I wasn't going to get the $50 or better that I didn't get shot. Okay. But I never heard anything about it. There was never anything in the paper. Nobody knew who did it. But I always had a feeling it was somebody who didn't like the song Feelings.
Right. So, okay. So you're working comedy. I want to hear, because the beginning of comedy always fascinates me, because I met you at the Comedy Factory Outlet. And when I started, the Works was going, Barney and the Going Bananas closed like 6 months after I started doing comedy. But how did you get involved in the start of comedy? Because it was such a great, back in the 80s and the early 90s, it was an amazing, the whole area was amazing between the CFO, Mitchell's, Garpati. But how did you get started? You're one of the forefathers.
All right, here's how we started. Not in the beginning. All right. There were 11 of us. We called ourselves the Funny 11 because we were sick of working these goofy places. We're going to start our own club. Okay? We had 11 comedians. We did 5 minutes apiece. We made next to no money. And we had no audience. We had nobody. People, Clay Heery was a genius among us. Every week he would say, stand in front of the club like your customers. And the 11 of us would stand there and people would walk by and say, oh, there's a line for this place. Maybe it's good. And they would get in line. And there was, next thing you know, there was 20, 30, 40. By the time there were 50 people, we unlocked the door, let them in. They never knew it was us. All right. Now, we were charging $1. We could hardly get anybody in, but God bless her. Liz Matt, who was one of the co-hosts of AM Philadelphia, came one night and saw the show, and somebody mooned us from the audience. And she was so incensed. She said, I'm going to give you guys some respect. She put us on AM Philadelphia. And from then on, we had a crowd. It was incredible. Matter of fact, we had such a crowd that a year later, we had our 1 year anniversary, and we had gone up to $1.99. Ooh, we were making a fortune. Ooh, $1.99. And for the 1 year anniversary, we put an ad in the paper, half price for our anniversary night. And then we realized half of the $1.99 is 99.5 cents. What do? Clay Heary, again, genius. Got a hacksaw. We set, and we sawed pennies in half. And we gave everybody a half a penny. To this day, there were half a pennies running around Philadelphia. They don't know where they came from. They came from the Comedy Factory outlet.
So you guys are doing it, and I know it was you and Clay and Steve Young. It was Will Neary. Who were some of those guys back then?
Okay, well, Frank Doherty, who kept our treasury in a tennis ball can in his car, in his trunk. Okay, Ken Lynch would come in with the curtain and hang up the curtain every night. Will Neary. Well, I'll tell you a Will Neary story. Now, this was not from the beginning. This was from when we got hot, okay? We started to have big stars. We had Soupy Sales, okay? And Will Neary wanted so much to be on the Soupy Sales show, but he was booked somewhere else. So I said, Will, I'll get you some kind of souvenir. I'm downstairs at Soupy Sales, and the club was upstairs. Soupy has to go to the bathroom. The only men's room was upstairs. He knew he couldn't go up because if they saw him, the show was over. They would mob him. All right. I said, don't worry. I went in the kitchen because downstairs was a restaurant, Spats. I got a stainless steel container. I said, here, Soupy, do what you have to do. He did what he had to do. I took the container. I cleaned it out. I couldn't put it back in the kitchen. So I gave it to Soupy. I said, here's a magic marker. Give Will Neary a souvenir. He put on there, dear Will, my pot is your pot. And Will Neary still has that on his mantle. But Will Neary was crazy. I mean, he did impressions, he did props. We had Big Daddy Graham, God rest his soul. We had, who else did we have? We had Mike Edwards, did impressions. We had so many people come in and out. And once we started to get famous, okay, we were packed every night. I mean, we're talking about, we went from 10 people on a Saturday to 2 shows Friday, 3 shows Saturday, always sold out, except for one night. We came in on a Friday and we looked and there were no reservations on the phone. Not one. And somebody said, let me go check something. And he went outside and, somebody cut our phone lines. Who could it have been? Maybe a competing club? Who's to say? So we went out on the street with flyers, half price, and we're giving flyers to everybody just to get people to come in. Those are the things that happen when you have your own club.
Now, when there was a split and there was the works and the outlet, it was funny because I came from a generation where I could work both, and Adam McKay worked both, and Keith Robinson, we could work both. But back when that happened, what was your decision to stay with Clay? Because you were an outlet guy. And then, that's the thing, you were an outlet guy.
Absolutely. But I was friendly with the works. This is true. I did a show at the works once. And remember we had those red satin jackets that said Comedy Factory Outlet? I did a show at the works. I wore the jacket, but I turned around and I looked at Steve Young. I said, look at this. I had put an applique on the back with a big clown face that covered Comedy Factory Outlet's logo. And he laughed, But you know who also everybody could do Going Bananas? Because Barney Weiss, and this is how hot comedy was, okay? The Comedy Works had their early show. When they sold out, people would walk across the street to our early show. If we sold out, we would send them to Barney Weiss's club, which was 3 blocks away, to see her early show. And comedy was so hot, there were nights when all 3 clubs had to turn people away. That's how hot comedy was. And then everybody wanted comedy. We did every crappy club that wanted comedy on like a Tuesday, a Wednesday. I'll tell you a story, okay? I won't mention the other 2 comics' names out of respect. We did a show. We went up to the place and we looked and we said, oh, this is going to be bad. We were the only car in the parking lot without a gun rack. All right. I think the place is called the There But For the Grace of God Go I Bar and Grill. All right. We walked in. The place was decorated ceiling to floor with Polaroid pictures of their customers. And we realized there was a 2 tattoo minimum. All right. Now the guy said, you must be the comedians because you dressed nice. I said, yeah. He said, we weren't going to have comedians. We was going to have dwarf tossing. Now let me explain. Dwarf tossing is probably the most egregious, insensitive thing ever done in a nightclub. They would get little people. They would put straps on them and handles, and they would slide them across the floor. And that was drove. He said, well, we didn't have dwarf tossing because them little guys is expensive. So we decided to have comedians. He said, okay, you're going to be right over there because we got a brick wall. See, we ready for it. And they said, wait a minute. That don't look right because in the middle of the brick wall, there was an exhaust fan. He said, that don't look right. We got a sheet downstairs in the basement. They get a sheet. They duct tape it to the wall. He said, now it looks like show business. We go up. We do our show. The first guy gets a few laughs. I get a few laughs. The headliner comes on. The place got smoky. The bartender decides to turn on the exhaust fan. It sucks in the sheet. It burns out the motor. There's a small fire. The show is over. And as we leave, we heard the owner say to the bartender, do we still got those little guys' phone numbers?
Okay, let me ask you something, because I always consider you a comic historian. You have such a, and I love on Facebook how you put like the old, I told someone how used to be always have write-ups from the Daily News and stuff like that. But I want to ask you, you had mentioned how comedy was so big at that time. All the clubs were packed. You knowing the business, what do you think made it so popular? Because it just blew up. You're right. The Outlet had 3 shows. The Works had 2. Going bananas. You had Mitchell's in Palmyra. You had Andy Scarpati in Cherry Hill, King of Prussia, Northeast Philly, everywhere. But what do you think? And looking back, because you know the business so well, why do you think it was just so huge? Because it was fascinating how it was just this insane tipping point.
The same thing that made it was what killed it, cable TV. There started to be 1 or 2 cable TV shows with a comedy club, and they would have 2, 3 comedians, and it whet people's appetite. And they said, let's go see this live, okay? And they came out in droves. However, 10 years later, there were 35 cable TV shows with comedians, and people said, oh, we could stay home and watch 35 shows and we don't have to drive and we don't have to get a parking space and we don't have to pay admission. So the same thing that made comedy is what killed it.
Now, when comedy starts dying, a lot of people scrambled. The clubs started closing and, the money wasn't the same as it was for us younger guys. Your features were getting paid MC money. So what does someone like you do? Because, you had the personality, everyone in association with comedy, you had the show, you have the column. So what do you do when the comedy clubs start closing? Because that's your bread and butter. Okay. I mean, that's where you make your cash.
Luckily, I had the background to be able to work both sides of the track. I could do the hipper stuff in comedy clubs, and I could do the middle of the road stuff in what were the old supper clubs. Okay. So I then started to do banquets, and I started to do what was left of the supper clubs, and I started to do the Poconos and the Catskills. Okay. Now, here's a story that involves both. I did like the little cruise ships, the day cruises. Agent calls me up. Now, this guy could demean you by saying your name. Okay. And he was like, Tommy, I got a show for you, Tommy, on a day cruise, Tommy. But don't do your comedy club crap. Okay. He said, it's going to be a Jewish crowd. Can you do some Jewish jokes? I said, yeah, I can do Jewish jokes. He said, all right, I'm going to have a Jewish singer and a Jewish keyboard player, and you do your Jewish jokes, but don't do your comedy club crap, okay? You promise me? I promise you. All right. We show up. The musician has klezmer music on a cassette, and he's playing klezmer music. And the singer's got her Jewish songs ready. I got my Jewish jokes ready. Okay. 5 buses pull up. There must have been a mistake, because 5 buses full of black people come up on the gangplank, and they hear the klezmer music and like, what kind of music is this? Are we in the wrong place? Now the musician realizes we better switch gears quick. So he runs back to his car, gets some R&B. The singer sings Motown, and I do my comedy club act. The next day, the agent calls me and says, Tommy, I heard you did good. I'm glad you did your comedy club crap.
So, okay. Now, I mentioned earlier.
To further answer your question, all right, then I started doing the Catskills and the Poconos. All right, now the Catskills were great because there were 3 areas. There was a Jewish area, Italian area, and an Irish area. Told Jewish jokes in the Jewish area, and Italian jokes in the Italian area, and Irish jokes in the Irish area. All right, Jewish joke. The Pines Hotel, first time I went there. I got there. I always get places 3-4 hours early. In the lobby, they were having a customer talent show. I figured, let's see who these people are, what they do, you know. And they were telling some jokes, and they were singing some songs. And the social director said, and tonight we got our big band night with a 22-piece big band and a comedian. And everybody went, boo. Why are they booing? Why are they? I went over to sir. I said, I'm the comedian. Why are they booing? He said, look, you can go home. We'll pay you. Don't worry about it. They don't want a comedian. I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? He said, we had a comedian here Wednesday night. Was so dirty, the whole audience walked out. Thursday night, I told him not to be dirty. The comedian wasn't dirty, but he wasn't funny. Half the audience walked out. They don't want to see a comedian. He said, just go home. Trust me, it'll be okay. I know what to do. For the next 3 hours, every time I crossed with him in the hall, he would say, Billy, you can go home. We'll pay you. Trust me, I know what to do. Right before the show, before they let him in, I went around back with Sosa. I said, I opened my bag. I said, you see these props? This is my act. I'm not going to do this act. I know what these people want. I ran around to the front. When they unlocked the door, 1,500 people came in, and I was in my tuxedo with the white hat, and they knew I was the comedian, and they were all in a bad mood. They were like, you better be good. You better not be dirty. If you are, we're going to walk out. I said, don't worry, we're going to have fun. They bring me on. I do 45 minutes of exactly what they want. I get a standing ovation. I run around to the front and see every one of these people when they left. And they all said, you saved this place from a lawsuit because the last 2 comedians were so bad. We were going to sue this place, but you saved them. So I worked the Pines for another 3 years. Now, the Irish place, okay, Gavin's, okay, this is why I show up 3 hours early. I'm at Gavin's the first time, and I'm walking around, just take a look at the place. Now, it was March. March, wherever you go, you do a St. Patrick's Day show. All right. I had just done 2 weeks worth of St. Patrick's Day shows in Paterson, New Jersey, in a big catering hall. And this couple comes up to me and says, "Oh, we're so glad you're here." I figured maybe they saw my picture in the lobby. He said, "No. We saw you last week in Paterson, New Jersey." I said, "Oh, wow." He said, "Our whole group saw you." I said, how many people in your group?" He said, "About 250. I said, 250 people have seen my act just last week? He said, no, not all of them, but the ones who didn't, we told them your jokes on the way up on the bus. Now I got 3 hours to write a whole new act. I go in a bar with a paper and pencil. I wrote every old Irish joke I knew. I tacked it up all over the place so I could see it like cue cards. I did 45 minutes of all new material that I never did before, except I knew the jokes. And I worked Gavin's another 2 years.
Now, what about the Italian club?
The Italian club was home free because, I'm Italian. So, I mean, I could literally do Italian jokes with Italian punchlines in Italian. And they loved that. They appreciated that. So that was Palaci's, and I worked there forever too. But then I made the jump to the Poconos. That was 10 years of luxury. I did every hotel. I did over 1,000 shows in the Poconos. I did 351 shows at Caesars in the Poconos. I'll tell you my first time. I walked in, and the sound man says, "I don't envy you." "Why?" He said, "You're following Andre and Sorrell." I said, I don't know. He said, "They're the best act in the Poconos. They sing, they dance, they do impressions, they have props, they have costumes. I don't envy you." All right. Usually I'll watch the act before me, but I was so psyched out, I didn't want to see them. They were on at 9, I was on at 11, okay? I didn't watch it. I came back about 20 minutes of 11. I just said, "Look, I'll do what I can do," and that's it. I went on, and I thought I did good. But when I came off, there was nobody there to say anything to me. There was no social director. There was no assistant social director. Nobody. So I went back to my room. I went to sleep. And the next day, I figured, let me go to the entertainment director's office and say, "Thank you for having me. I hope you have me back." So I said, "Thank you for having me, Tony Bell. I hope you have me back." And he said, "Why did you say that?" I said, "Well, I would like to come back." He said, "Come with me. Come in my office." I go in. He's mad at me. I'm like a little kid in the principal's office. I don't know what happened. He said, "I'm going to call your agent on the phone." Calls the agent, puts him on his speakerphone. And he says, "I have Tommy Moore in my office. He said he would like to come back. Why did he say that?" Oh, what did I do? Agent said, "Well, I didn't have time to call him this morning and explain." I'm sweating. He said, "Do you want to tell him or should I?" Agent said, "You could tell him." All right, hangs up. He said, "While you were still on, the social directors and I had a meeting, and you're booked here for the next 52 weeks. I looked up and said, "Thank you, God," and I stopped sweating. I love the Poconos.
See, okay, so I just don't know. I want to get into you about this because I know you've written a book, and my mom had passed a while ago, and I found an old scrapbook, and she had all these cutouts for me back in the day, as I said, like the Inquirer in Philly. And I remember one of them was, and I was so happy. I just knew at the outlet, and Stu Bykowski posted one of my jokes in the last word, and I said, "I worked jury duty. I made $5 a day. Now I know what a migrant farm worker feels like." And I was so ecstatic. But then I see you on Facebook, and you put up all the clippings. I said, Mike Saccone. I think I was in when did you start collecting those clippings, and where did you keep them? Because you have a whole library of them. But I see you put stuff up. Oh, back in the day at the works, or Ben Curlin. When did you start collecting them back in the 80s and
Oh
90s? Did you
yeah,
just cut them out?
the
And
origi-
how'd you do that?
I have the originals because I first started because people were writing about me and writing stories about me and putting my picture in the paper. Matter of fact, remember Bob Rumnock from Pats and Bob? Okay. Bob Rumnock called me up one day and said, Tommy, are you okay? I said, yeah, why? He said, I didn't see your picture in the paper today. I thought maybe you were dead. So I started collecting mine. And I said, what the heck, let me collect everybody's. And I collected everybody's picture, and I have them all in one huge book. And I mean, this has been my life. These have been my friends. So it's like some people have pictures of their family. I have pictures of my family in one book, and I have pictures of comedians in the other book.
Now, tell me about the book you wrote. How many you've written more than one book? How many books have you written?
I wrote 3 books.
Okay, tell me about them.
All right. The first one is called A PhD in Happiness from the Great Comedians. And I realized that I had a comedy corner, and it was called Comedy Corner. I had a Comedy Corner newspaper column for 11 years. And I interviewed every comic on the East Coast. And I realized that some of the advice they were giving me was not just good show business advice. It was good life advice. And I said, let me put all this stuff in a book. And I have gotten so many emails from people who have read the book and said, you pulled me out of depression. You made me happy again. You gave me good life advice. So that's probably the best book I wrote. The second book was called Joke Telling 101, how I never let comedy interfere with my education, okay? And I taught people in that book how to tell jokes because I taught comedy and the history of stand-up comedy and how to do stand-up at Temple University for 5 years. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. The first time we were going to do it, we didn't realize was the first anniversary of 9/11. And I went to the people at Temple and I said, maybe this is not a good idea. They said, yeah, probably nobody will come, but let's see. I go in, I'm walking toward my classroom, and I hear noise. Oh, there's people. I walked in, there were 50 chairs. There were 75 people there. They were sitting on the floor. They were sitting on a windowsill. And after it was over, they just said, thank you. We needed to laugh so much. And that's what comedy can do. It can take your mind off all your problems, all your worries. I don't know how much time we got, but we got time for a story. Okay.
We have lots of time.
All right, I'll tell you a story. When I was first starting out, and you work anywhere, an agent sent me to what was going to be a Jewish senior citizen center. And he said, it's only about 10 minutes over the bridge. Well, you know what that means. It was about an hour and a half over the bridge, okay? And by the time you factor in the gas and the tolls, you're making bupkis, okay? So here I am, and I walk in, and here are all these old Jewish seniors who had seen the best entertainers in their life. And they're looking at me like, who is this kid? And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life? Well, I hit the stage, and I hit the stage running. And I just did everything I had, and they started to laugh. And they were laughing, and they were laughing good. And by the time it was over, I got a standing ovation. And I saw one guy up front with a short sleeve shirt. And he had numbers tattooed on his arm. I knew what this meant. He was a survivor of the death camps. And at that moment, I couldn't hear the applause. I couldn't see the standing. All I could do was see those numbers. And I said to myself, if I can give this guy who saw such horror in his life 1 hour of fun, I know what I'm doing with my life. That was 50 years ago.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep with this about, that's a story. It's a great story. I want you to tell me two stories. One about one of the most memorable nights of you doing stand up. I want you to tell me a good one, and I want you to tell me a memorable night of a bad one, because we always have those stories. To you, what is one of those gigs you look back at and went, holy crap, man, this is just amazing. I made it. Or tell me one of those.
The first time I did, there were 3 Caesars hotels in the Poconos. The biggest one was Cove Haven, 1,500 people. And I got a standing ovation. And the MC brought me back out and said, what do you have to say? And I just looked at the audience and said, this is my first time here. And every time you work someplace for the first time, you hope there'll be a good audience. I said, I could not have asked for a better audience than you. That was one of my best. Okay, one of my worst. This is amazing. I was working a different hotel in the Poconos, and it was my first time. And I have been doing it for about 25 years. So I knew what I was doing. I knew where the laughs came. I knew what the blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. And I walked on, and jokes that usually got 8s and 10s on the laugh scale, getting 2s and 3s. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? But I girded my loins and I did my thing and I walked off. Now I go back to my room and I'm saying, oh God, please don't let anybody know about this. Don't let it, if they hear I'm washed up, it's over. It ain't going to happen. I literally prayed myself to sleep. Next morning, I come downstairs. I didn't want to really go to breakfast because I didn't want to see these people, but I was hungry. So I went down and I'm sitting at the table eating breakfast, and people are coming up to me saying, oh, you were good, you were good, you were good, you were good. And I'm like, are they putting me on? And the morning guy is saying, everybody's talking about how good you are. And I said, how could this be? Now, they hired me another 59 times. So it must have been for real. And I just looked up and said, thank you, God. Don't tell me there's no God. Okay? But I was almost in tears. Almost in tears. All right, I got to tell you another story. This was in the Catskills, first time at a place. Agent says, all right, Tommy, it's going to be you and a singer. The singer's going to bring a sound system because you can't use their sound system. Why not? Well, it's going to be in use. All right. We drive to the Catskills. I go on first. The singer comes on next. The social director introduces me. I go up. Now, I got to back up. The reason they had been using their sound system was tonight was debate night. They were going to debate a topic, and the topic was, are we in an immoral war? Well, they're screaming at each other. It's not right. Our children are being killed. It's not. And now the comedy of Tommy Moore. Thank you very much. I went on. The first 3 minutes were icy, very icy, but I wore them down. And by the time it was over, I got a standing ovation. All right. Now I look for the social director to come up and bring up the singer. He's nowhere. He's not there. So I bring the singer up. The singer sings. We go home. I get a phone call the next day from the agent. Tommy, they're not going to pay you, Tommy. Why not? They said you didn't do good, Tommy. I said, I got a standing ovation. That ain't what they told me, Tommy. Don't snow me, Tommy. I said, I'm not snowing you. I'm going to call this place and find out don't call them, Tommy. They're very angry. Don't call. I'm calling them. If you don't give me the phone number, I'll look it up in the book. I called him. I said, I want to talk to the social director. Yeah, this is Tommy Moore. I was the comedian last night. What's the problem? He said, look, you seem like a nice guy, but what I saw, you didn't do good. I said, how much did you see? He said, the first 3 minutes. I said, no wonder. I said, do me a favor. Do yourself a favor, okay? Talk to your customers at lunch. See what they say. About 3 o'clock, I get a phone call from the agent. Tommy, come to my office. I'll write you a check. Show business.
It's amazing, those old stories. Now you've worked a long time. Who are some of the acts that you met that you were just taken back by? Like, oh my God, I'm meeting someone, because we all meet people. Like I opened for Dice Clay at the Outlet right before he blew up. But who are some of the acts that you met that you were just like, you were taken aback because there was someone you really? I mean, you mentioned Soupy Sales earlier, but who are some of the other guys you met?
Shecky Greene. I was 19 years old. I went to the Valley Forge Music Fair, and he was there all week. I went the first night. I sent a little note back. I want to be a comedian. I came to see you. I can't afford to watch every night, but I wanted to see you on the first night. He sent the guy out to get me, brought me into his dressing room, called in the theater manager and said, you see this kid? You let him in every night for free, and you let him come back to my dressing room. And every night he got a standing ovation, and every night he blew them away. And every night he let me come back, and I talked with him, and he gave me advice, and he gave me ideas. And as a matter of fact, he talked to his manager, George, and he said, George, come here. This kid wants to be a comedian. Do something for him. And I said, George, let me be honest. I want to be a comedian, but I don't have an act yet. And he said, okay, but that's how nice a guy Shecky Greene was. This kid wants to be a comedian. Do something for him.
Who else? Give me some others. I love these stories. I love to hear about people because you've met so many people.
Back then, things like AM Philadelphia and People Are Talking used to have a big star comedian who was coming into Atlantic City. And they would get 2 or 3 of us local, young, new comedians to sit and ask him questions. So I met a lot of people that way. Joan Rivers, sweetheart. On a break, I said, the agents are making me crazy. One agent says, do this kind of material. The other agent says, do that kind of material. She said, no, you do what you want to do. What works, you keep. What doesn't work, you throw away. What a sweetheart she was. Alan King. I did a show with Alan King. And about halfway through, this was the Jane Whitney show. At the break, he says to me, how come they're telling everybody where I'm going to be and they're not telling anybody where you're going to be? I said, well, you're the star. You're here. He said, oh, we'll see about that. They come back from commercial. Jane Whitney's with the microphone ready to ask a question of an audience. He says, no, John, hold up. He said, I'm Alan King. I'm going to be at resorts. I'm going to be at resorts another 5 times this year. Don't come see me. These kids, go see them. They're the future of comedy. Could you be nicer than that?
See, that's what's great. I always find out that,
Go ahead.
No, the people I've met, I always found out because I interview a lot of celebrities, and they're all good people, man, because they get it. I mean, so many of them get it.
Yeah, especially when they know you're young and you're starting out, they feel for you. Because comedians are like women in childbirth. We all go through the same thing, even though we may not know each other. We all go, and we have that empathy for each other. A very similar piece of information. I interviewed And all of these are in my books. But I interviewed Joey Bishop, who comes from my old neighborhood, and it was a rough neighborhood. We had a kind of neighborhood. Two guys would be on the corners talking. One would say, "Ain't it a shame what happened to Al?" I think I said, "Shut up. It ain't till tomorrow." Now, Joey Bishop said to me, the most important advice he ever got was from an old Italian man who said, "You do what you be." In other words, Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." Same thing. Italian guy said it with fewer words. Joey Bishop told me a story. There was a singer named Robin Wilson. Remind me, I'll tell you a Robin Williams story in a minute. There was a singer named Robin Wilson. And it was her first time on TV. She was from Hawaii. And she used to sing barefoot. And she said to Joey Bishop, "I don't know, this is my first time. Maybe I shouldn't be barefoot." And Joey Bishop said, No, you do who you are. Because if you do who you are, you run one risk, and that is they won't like you. If you do something that is not you, you run two risks. Number one, they still won't like you, and you'll wonder if they would have liked you if you did it your way. But number two, they will like you, and you'll be stuck doing something a way you don't want to do it for the rest of your life. Joey Bishop, good advice. Good advice. I'll tell you a story.
Tell me Robin Williams' story.
What, huh? Oh,
Robin
yeah.
Williams. Tell me the Robin Williams story.
Robin Williams story. So we're Comedy Factory Outlet. We're a little side street in Philadelphia. We're not in Los Angeles. We're not in New York. We're a little dinky club in the South. Okay. Car pulls up. Guy gets out. Says, "Can we get 4 tickets?" I said, "Sorry, we're sold out." Goes back to the car. Comes back. Said, "My friend in the car says, if you get us 4 seats, he'll do a free show for you." "Who's your friend?" He said, "Robin Williams." We went over, we looked in the car. It was Robin Williams. We found 4 seats, okay? Now, he knew, like Soupy Sales, if they saw him, the show was over. So we hid him in a little room downstairs. And we told all the other acts, just do 10 minutes apiece. So they all did 10 minutes. And the MC, who was Dennis Johnson, said, sometimes a big star comes in, wants to do a free show. Here he is, Robin Williams. And everybody went, yeah, right. And Robin Williams walked on stage. And they went nuts. And he did an hour. And he did so much, he had so much fun. He did another hour, second show. And the next day, every friend I had was mad at me because they said, you had Robin Williams and you didn't tell me. We didn't know. We didn't know. True story.
Now, so what do you think the state of comedy is now? You know, everyone says this changes. And, you know, I sit there like, I still perform, not as much as I do, but I'm lucky that, you know, a lot of people I do networking with and come out. So I get the crowd that's 40 and up, 45 and up, that gets my stuff, that doesn't get offended, that they understand it's comedy. You know, I'm not dirty. I drop F-bombs, but I'm not mean. But so what do you think the state of comedy is? Someone who's been around as a scholar, I would say, but what do you think the state of comedy is now?
Okay. The difference is comedians today are commentators. Comedians then were entertainers. Okay? Milton Berle, Henny Young, and Shecky Greene, they didn't talk about the political condition. They didn't talk about the social condition. They came out and did jokes. They sang parodies. It was entertainment, pure and simple. And that's the difference.
Now, as a comic, how often do you perform now?
Maybe twice a month. I mean,
Now,
I
do you still get?
I used to work 6-7 shows a week. But very honestly, the reason I work twice a month is that I pick and choose. I just say, let me see, what are the demographics of that audience? You know, if they're 20 years old, no, thank you, no. You have to learn at some point to say no. It's not right for me. you know, but I do banquets, I do corporates, and the corporates are wonderful. They'll make you crazy, but they're wonderful because I'll tell you a couple of corporate stories, okay? I did show you how clean you have to be. I did one corporate show, and after the show, the guy comes up to me and says, I can book you for 23 more shows, but you got to change one word in your act. I'm like, I'm clean. What word did I say? He said, you know when you do the magic trick with a guy, a volunteer, and you say to him, you screwed up? Can you say you messed up? I said, how much did his show pay? He told me. I said, I could say you messed up. Yeah, I could say you messed up. But you got to go in, you got to commandeer the situation with these corporate shows because the banquet manager has no idea what comedy should be about or what it needs to be, okay? I did one, and dinner was at 6. Show's supposed to be at 7. It's 7 o'clock. They're still walking around at the buffet line with food because it's always late, you know. And the banquet manager says, you can go on now. I said, no, I'll wait until everybody's finished and they're sitting. And she said, no, you can go on. I said, no, I can't because they're walking around with food and they're not going to pay attention. Are you ready for this line? She said, oh, they have to pay attention? They make you crazy. They make you crazy.
But you love the biz. Do you still do you still get nervous when you get on stage at all? Do you ever get the butterflies? Because I do. I always think I'm going to screw up because I don't do my act in order, and I always sit there and I always end up I do okay. I do good actually, but I still get nervous. You don't get nervous at all anymore? No butterflies?
Never. I get nervous if the check doesn't clear the bank. But no, I have never gotten nervous a day in my life because here are the things that make you nervous. If you think that audience is better than you, you're nervous. Okay? Tell you a story about people may not know who who's the star of Gypsy? What was her name? Ethel Merman. Ethel Merman. Great Broadway star. On Broadway, a dozen shows. Opening night of Gypsy. Somebody goes back to see her and says, Ethel, you look so calm. Aren't you worried? Aren't you nervous that there are first nighters out there? There are critics out there. Aren't you nervous? And she said, no, I'm not nervous because if they knew anything, they would be on stage. You have to know that you're in charge. You have to know that you know what you're doing. The other reason for being nervous is if you don't really know your act yet. But when you know your act backward, forward, inside out, when you can wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do your act, then there's no reason to be nervous. Now, there's reason to be nervous if the conditions are not right. And they're working against you. That's why I show up 3 hours early. Tell you a story. I walk in, and Sue Kelly? Do you know Sue Kelly? Okay. She was a comedian, and she was working the door at this Holiday Inn. And I go always 3 hours early. And I go in and I look, and the room is laid out totally wrong. There's like 50 tables on this side, 50 tables on this side, and a big dance floor in the middle. I said, we're not going to have dancing. I said, Sue, hold the people back until I tell you. I dragged all the tables down front. When they all got down front, I said, now you can let them in. Okay? Now here's who taught me that lesson, Milton Berle. Milton Berle said, this is when he was the biggest star in the world. This was the 50s. Okay? He was Mr. Television. And he had been booked to do a banquet at, I forget what hotel in New York. But anyway, he goes to the hotel, goes to the room, comes down 3 o'clock in the afternoon to survey the situation. And he said, where's the banquet going to be? They send him to a room. He looks, it's all wrong. It's all wrong. So Milton Berle rolled up his sleeves, drags all the tables down front, puts all the chairs with the tables. Now everything is perfect. Okay? Goes back to his room, showers, gets dressed, comes down for the show, half hour early, goes to the room where the banquet's supposed to be. They had directed him to the wrong room. He had reorganized somebody's entire wedding. So to make amends, he did a show for their wedding. To this day, there are people saying, Milton Berle appeared at my wedding. But you got to commandeer the situation. Otherwise, you have a reason to be nervous. Okay? I'll tell you another story. Reason to be nervous. Okay? Here's if the crowd is the wrong kind of crowd. An agent sent me to a job once. And he said, you're going to be perfect for this. Remember that word. Remember perfect. I went in. It was a banquet room upstairs. The banquet room is configured like one alley in a bowling lane. It's 15 feet wide, 300 feet long. There were 38 tables in a single file line. Table number 1 is right at the dance floor. Table 38 is in a different zip code. All right? There's no lights. There's no microphone. I said to myself, could this be any worse? Never ask if it could be any worse, because fate will tell you. Young couple came in. I was already 2.5 hours early. Young Asian couple came up and said, oh, you're the comedian. The agent said you'd be perfect for this job. She said, now, he told me that you bring up a lot of audience volunteers. I said, yeah. She said, could I give you some advice? What? Only bring up people from table 38. Why? That's pretty far away. It's going to take them a long time to get up here. She said, well, they're the only ones who speak English. Thank God I know magic, and I do comedy magic. I do like 10 different kinds of comedy in my act. I do a show, okay? There were 6 people at table 38. I did 10 minutes with each of them. I did my hour. Thank you and good night. Perfect.
That's amazing. You know, we gotta wrap up. And before we do, I always ask my guests this question. Looking back at your career, and you can talk about your personal life or your professional life, what are a few things that make you proud? When you look back, what are some things that make you proud?
Aside of the fact that every show I ever did, I made people laugh, that makes me proud. I, about 15 years ago, helped found in North Carolina, where I live now, helped found the Moore Regional Hospital Clowns. And we visited over 1,500 patients a year. 2 stories, one funny, one not so funny. I'll tell you the not so funny, serious story first. My partner and I, there were 11 of us clowns. We always did things as partners. My partner and I are told which rooms to go into and which rooms not to go into. Because maybe the person just had an operation, maybe they're on meds, maybe they're asleep. Okay. So we go by this room that we're told not to go into. And the wife is there, and she's like, oh, come in, come in. Well, it's a command performance, so we go in. She says to her husband, honey, open your eyes. There's clowns here. He opens his eyes. We do our little 3-minute thing, and he doesn't laugh, but he smiles kind of, you know. And as we're leaving, she's thanking us profusely. I said, well, we didn't really do that much. She said, you don't understand. This is the first time in 3 days he's opened his eyes. All right, the funny story. We walked into one room, and the woman's on the phone, and she says, "Oh, I have to hang up now. Either two clowns just walked into my room, or they have very good drugs in this hospital." So that's what I'm proud of.
That's awesome, Tommy. I'm so glad we got to talk. Now, how can people get in touch with you and find out about what's going on and find your books? How do they get that stuff?
All right. My website is profcomedy.com, PROFCOMEDY.com. And if you want to see my 3 books, go to Amazon, go to Kindle, put in Comedian Tommy Moore books, and they'll come up. One's called A PhD in Happiness from the Great Comedians. One's called Joke Telling 101. And one's called Comedians Telling Tales Out of School.
All right, so people, go check out Tommy. Go get his books. Buy his books, people. Also, go to a comedy train wreck there on the YouTube. You know, Jimmy Corrin, who produces this show, is a great, does some great work, man. You know, he really gives a big voice to a lot of comedians. The Wid and John Kensel have a show. You know, we have Coleman Green and Chico Loca and Dean Norris have a show. And he has a bunch of other shows. He's always, McGonagall's got a great show. He's always has new shows going. So please go follow Comedy Trainwreck. Also follow them on Facebook. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. My other podcast, you can find over 1,048 episodes. Posting next week is Dustin Gwynn, who was a star of 21 Jump Street. Also, if you go into YouTube, look up Coop's Comedy Corner or find me under the Comedy Trainwreck banner, or look up the Coop Tank. That's my weekly business podcast, which I talk to 3 local business people about inspiration and stuff like that, which I actually today found out I just won the Independent Earworthy Local Podcast of the Year. So check that out. And also don't forget coopscomedycorner.com. You can get all good merch there. So check out Tommy Moore. Check out Comedy Trainwreck. Check me out. I will be gone next week because it's my wife's birthday. So anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll have a good week.
Coop's Comedy Corner.